Sean here, CEO of Talk2 and co-host of this podcast. We don't normally do this, but on some of the episodes moving forward, we're going to be introducing some ads before, during, and at the end of each episode. We promise we'll keep things short, but my company Talk2 has been saving veterinarians like you time every day. And I wanted to share some testimonials from our users. Listen to them or fast forward. We'll be sure to keep it brief.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Sean Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, please get us started.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach, and I'm excited to introduce David Teaster. David is the Product Marketing Director at SATELLAI, where he leads product positioning, target user identification, messaging strategy, and creative development. With nearly a decade of experience in the consumer tech industry, he has spearheaded successful campaigns from top brands like Anchor, TP-Link, Dream, and Eureka. A lifelong pet lover, David's experience with various animals fuel his passion for innovative pet technology, bringing a unique and heartfelt perspective to his marketing approach at SATELLAI. David, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell us all about it. What is SATELLAI? What are you building? And what gets you excited every day?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I'm so glad you asked. So SATELLAI, fundamentally, we're just about connecting pets to love and care. We're creating and innovating technologies so that people and pets can connect with each other and understand each other, basically as best as they possibly can. The technologies that we kind of use at the core of that foundation are satellite and AI, hence the name SATELLAI. Just because, we figure that fundamentally what you want to do most is you want to know where your dog is and you want to know how your dog's doing. And so we're trying to look for ways to kind of create technology and leverage that to help people understand their dogs and take care of their dogs.
That makes tons of sense, and it's really cool. So, David, we've had a number of wearable kind of people on our show in the past. We've talked to lots. It was really exciting. I think if we go back through the booms in pet care, so we have the AI scribe boom now. Then before that, we had the appointment booking boom. And then before that, I think the wearable boom happened a while ago. There was all these companies that kind of came out of nowhere. There was a couple of, at least one notable exit. And then there was a few that kind of have come on since. What's different about you guys?
Yeah, great. So I'd like to just kind of start as really we're looking to kind of combine everything into one place. Actually, our founders kind of met each other while they were working in a smart wearables company. I think they were working at Huami, working on the Amazfit, if I remember right. So one of the fundamental ideas I think that they kind of started with was how do we make a smart wearable that's designed for pets? And from there, it kind of boomed out into, well, what are the things that you'd want to know about your pet so that you can keep track of everything? And then on top of that, with obviously a couple of years ago, you had the big AI boom coming onto the scene with ChatGPT kind of really kicking things off in the public consciousness and really in some ways redefining what, companies kind of mean when they talk about AI. And so kind of putting everything together and combining it, ideally, right now, we're still pretty new. And so we've only got one product. We've got another one launching later this year. And ideally, we want to be able to build out to where we actually have an entire ecosystem where we can help people keep track of and understand what's going on with their dogs and eventually cats as well, and hopefully any other pet, just as holistic a way as possible, because your dogs and your cats, they don't really tell you when they're not feeling well or when something's a little off. So having that kind of data that you can have to look at in one spot can help open up whole new dimensions of taking care of your pets, understanding what's going on, and just having a closer relationship with them and being together with them long term. You want that longevity in your relationship with your pets.
So let's double click into the features. So what's available now? What's the big vision and why one would get excited about it today of what it is?
Okay, great. Yeah. So what's available right now is we have the SATELLAI collar that's already come to market. I think we officially put it on sale back in April this year, and we were already making pretty good progress in terms of acquiring users and collecting data so that we can build out more features in the future as well. But fundamentally, what it's already got is GPS tracking, and that's powered by, we connect with 5 global navigation satellite systems, which includes the US GPS system, the European Galileo system, Russia's GLONASS system, China's Beidou system, and Japan's QZSS system. And so basically, like, that puts a lot of satellite constellations kind of at your disposal so that you can see where your dog is at any given time. Basically, whichever constellation can provide the best positioning data, that's going to show you where your pet is. That leverages itself more into, like, beyond tracking. It also works really well for virtual fencing, which is kind of training based fencing that you can create at any size in the app. And then you train your dog to respond to feedback that the collar provides to your dog, which is, for our product, it's fully customizable. And we've tried to give every option we can. So we've got like audio options, vibration options. And for like dogs with like really strong prey drives that they need some kind of physical sensation, we do have kind of a static correction option, which a lot of people kind of associate with a strong thing, but it's really just about like a muscle activation in order to kind of get your dog's attention. But it's fully optional. Beyond that, we've got an IP68 waterproof rating, so it's really, really durable. IP68 basically means it can withstand prolonged immersion in water. And then one of the big things that we imagine building out in the future, we already have some basic functions for this, like activity monitoring, and we've got our own AI in the app that you can talk with and ask questions, which we've already trained off of our own like breed database. So generally right now, if you ask it questions, it'll kind of reference your dog's breed and be able to provide insights based on general breed characteristics. But as we're working at the vision, this is kind of the cool part, I think, about like the AI aspect, is even with the same hardware, we're going to be able to do so much more with it in the future as we update the software and do more versions and get more data to provide training off of, to where we'll be able to have it reference other things and be able to give more specific insights, not just for like based on dogs in general, but ideally like your dog. So right now we've already got activity tracking, so you can see like how active your dog is versus how much your dog is resting, which already lends itself to some health monitoring. Because like if you notice, just like with your own stuff, when you're watching your heartbeat, for example, and then suddenly you're like, well, why is my heartbeat so much slower these days? Is something wrong? And then you go to the doctor. We don't quite have that specifically for dogs yet, but with the activity, you can see like, okay, well, my dog's usually running about this much every week. And if suddenly that activity drops off, you might realize maybe they're not feeling well. Could be an infection, could be an allergy, could be, maybe they're injured and I didn't know it. And already that's kind of an early warning system, I think, for what's going on with your pets that you might miss otherwise.
That's amazing. And to build on that, or like I guess the obvious question for me, I used to have an Apple Watch. I loved it, great, and then I had to charge it, and I really hated that. So let's talk about charging.
Sure. So for our current satellite collar, right now, our maximum battery life, based on our previous lab testing, is about 5 days. And that's kind of like realistic if you kind of set everything perfectly and have it in like power saving mode. We're noticing from a lot of user feedback that 3 days tends to be more normal through everyday use. But at the same time, as we do different app updates and stuff, then it kind of utilizes power differently. So that might kind of fluctuate in the future, ideally getting longer. But as we're adding new features and things, there's some margin there for what you can expect. But I'd say right now, probably like 3 days is a pretty realistic expectation for normal usage. How often it has to sync, how strong the signal is, things like that, that also kind of can influence the battery life. But we think like 1 day is obvious, we're almost 90% confident in most use cases minimum. Whereas like 3 days is, I think, is a pretty realistic expectation. And if you really want to stretch it out, 5 days is achievable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you listed quite a few features that are related to the mobility and sort of intensity and things like that. What else is coming? Other features that can help with identification of diseases or behavioral patterns? What else?
It's a little early to say that, but for sure. But I think like there are things that will make that possible, that we're already kind of looking at for that. For example, we actually have like motion detectors within the collar itself that can kind of detect your dog's motion. And right now, that's mostly breaking down into active versus resting time. But we think in the pretty near future, we'll be able to actually, once we get enough like data to compare it to, we'll actually be able to break down activities by type, like how much your dog is running, how much your dog is walking, how much your dog is jumping, potentially even swimming, or What we'd like to get to as well is like once we can monitor like how much your dog is sleeping versus how much your dog is resting. Resting being your dog being inactive but awake.
Yeah, I mean, it seems exciting. The GPS technology alone, which then gives you all of these other windows into activity that then you can analyze and apply software to, seems really, really exciting. As one of the people inside this organization, what's the most exciting thing to you? What fires you up about what you guys are doing?
I'd say some of the most exciting things for me, just as a pet owner in the past, I travel a lot now and I've got little kids and, live in a small apartment. So we do have pets at the office though. So I get to have pets by proxy. One of the benefits of working at a pet company. But what I was going to say, just like in the past, having pets, especially dogs, would be like the GPS tracking, I think, is a huge benefit, especially that the fences are kind of reinforced by training. Like, I honestly feel like a big part of that is that thing to keep in mind is it might be powered by technology, but it's actually supported by your relationship with your dog, that you've trained your dog to respond to certain cues and to behave in a certain way. So you train your dog to those fences, and then, now you've got a fence that your dog won't jump over, squeeze between, or dig under because it's virtual and it's reinforced by their training. You take them anywhere, you've got like total freedom. Like when I was in college, I had my dog at home and then I drive up to my mom's on the weekend because, my dad was deployed. And, it could be kind of troublesome to get my dog there and keep my dog here because like my mom didn't have, like my mom's out in the mountains and sometimes there's gaps in the fences and stuff. And he squeezed out one time and I didn't get him. Well, he came back kind of about 2 years later just because he got picked up in a different town and they scanned his microchip and our data came up. So I think somebody else picked him up. But, that was one of those things. I had that dog for years and, he'd run off sometimes, but he always came back until that one time he didn't. He had to be brought back. And so I feel like the GPS tracking and the fencing is helpful on that part. I mean, that's a big thing for me. And then also just the general health monitoring. Because, some dogs, some cats too, like they get sick and, they don't want to trouble the pack. And so they might run off to kind of deal with it themselves, to not create a problem. But, you could help them. And you don't always know what's going on with your dogs. You don't know what's happened. They seem fine one day. And then the next day, like, oh, I didn't even know that there was anything wrong. And now they're injured or they're behaving differently. And then you get to the vet and you find out, oh, he's got this problem, he's got that problem. I mean, I had big problems with my cats on that. My dogs were a little, because cats are a bit more removed from you, but like dogs will be a bit more engaging and affectionate. But like, yeah, like we had one cat, he almost had like kidney failure and he almost died. And like, it was just because my mom like rushed him to the vet and they got him taken care of. And it was really touch and go there. But like, you didn't know anything was wrong. So for me personally, those two things are kind of the big ones that I get most excited about, just because putting myself back in that time, I just think we can help so many pets and so many people that love their pets to be able to just be together for longer.
What would you do if completing your medical records took half the time? Dr. Melinda Hilligas found exactly that with Talkatoo. She could finally break free from the stress of completing her medical records. Here's what she had to say.
The biggest thing that has changed in my life is I would bet you the time that I have to spend managing my medical records has decreased by at least 60 to 75%.
Get full access to all of Talkatoo's powerful features for your first month for just $1. Sign up today at talkatoo.com/VIP. That's Talkatoo, TALKATOO.com/VIP.
So I have a sort of a technical maybe question because, as Sean mentioned, there was a long kind of thread of these wearables that came more of a sort of a hardware invention, and then now we have this explosion of AI. So what do you think is the main advantage of your product these days? Is it the hardware and the way that it's tracking, or is it the AI that's giving more sort of interpretation of that behavior?
For the way that it's tracking, I mean, as a newer company, we're still kind of adding more software algorithms and things to make things a bit more accurate. But as far as the hardware goes, I'd say that we're pretty reliable and we've got definite advantages there. And now we're mostly looking at like optimizing the processes to just make it as accurate and as responsive as possible. Because for the satellite, we've actually got two antennas integrated into the collar. which so it can uplink and downlink at the same time as far as like the satellite positioning. We've got an eSIM, so it works on multiple cellular carriers and kind of automatically connects to whichever carrier provides the strongest signal for your location. And then we're working on two frequencies for the location data. So basically, on the L1 bandwidth and the L5 bandwidth, it transmits both. And then because they're at different wavelengths, they kind of bounce off of obstacles differently, which can make the signal more accurate in complex environments. For the AI, I think that one's right now, I'd say the location technology is probably a bit more reliable and is one of the better aspects. But I think that the AI has more potential of what it's going to be able to add and contribute in the future.
That makes tons of sense. Yeah, so it's interesting. I just, as we were talking, I was on the website, and so you're using GPS, and then you're sending that data to your servers with cellular data. So I buy the collar, and I'm paying for a cell phone plan for my dog, so that the data is able to be transmitted in real time. Is that correct?
Basically, yeah, it carries over 4G networks to be able to transmit on cellular data.
So now the question becomes, my dog runs away in the mountains, and there's no cell phone coverage. Does he just go offline until he's back in cell range?
Yeah, right now I'm afraid so. We are working on a future product. We announced it in previous press releases and stuff, so I think it's okay for me to talk about this because we already announced it back at CES. We've got one that actually has a Qualcomm chip built in that we're developing to where it'll do direct satellite uplink without cellular coverage.
Cool.
So in that case, there's still a caveat, like your phone still needs 4G to be able to receive that data.
Yeah.
But in that case, your dog runs off to the mountains, then you'll be able to see the location and at least know where to start looking.
Amazing.
For the current caller, yeah, honestly, like it's best for kind of closer to your home and where you've got good 4G networks. I wouldn't really think this one's optimal for taking your dog hiking out in the middle of, the national park where there's no reception.
Yeah, no, that makes tons of sense. So I want to go back to my iPhone, Apple Watch experience. So I went from an Apple Watch because I like the sleep tracking and the fitness tracking to a Citizen Watch, which uses low frequency Bluetooth and very, very low battery consumption. In fact, it runs off a standard watch battery, and the battery lasts about 8 months. And I would love one of these collars for my pet if it lasted a long time. Is that feedback that you get from users? I mean, the geo fencing or the fencing, the virtual fencing, that's a normal battery consumption thing for anybody that has something like that. Sorry, it's a two-part question. But once it knows where the fence is, does the battery consumption decrease substantially? So, two questions. Are you guys thinking about longer battery life? And second part, is the battery life extended once the dog already knows where not to go?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Some of the details I might have to check with the tech team to be sure. But from my understanding, if your dog's not engaging the feedback, if your dog knows where it shouldn't go, then obviously it's not using the feedback as often, then that alone would already cut down on some of the battery usage. There are different low power modes where you can kind of reduce the location update frequency. Well, I guess I should have started with the battery life. Yes, we would love to find ways to get the battery life longer. And some of the ways we might be able to do that with future products is maybe remove certain features, make things more compact, maybe scale things down a bit to where it's doing a few things rather than everything. Right now, like I said, the battery life is about 3 days in practical terms. It actually it recharges in about 2 hours, something I forgot to mention before. So even with recharging, it's not necessarily as huge a hassle as it might be for, say your Apple Watch. As far as what you were talking about, the lo-fi stuff, I mean, I think that is something we could consider in the future, but part of the limits with that is when it's working off of Bluetooth, from my understanding, similar to how an Apple AirTag would work, is that for it to transmit, the range is quite limited, but you can extend it by having a Bluetooth activated device nearby that it kind of pings off of. So from my understanding of the Bluetooth technology is it's you have to have a device within about 20 to 30 feet in order for that to be able to, supply you a location. So something like that would be, I think, for pets at least, it's probably doable if you're living in a big city. Not so much if, my use case where my mom was living up in the mountains where the nearest neighbor is, 500 yards down the road. Probably not great for that.
Amazing.
Makes sense. Well, we ran out of time as we usually do, and we always ask two questions at the end. The first question, is there a YouTube video, TED Talk, book, or anything that inspired you recently that you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so I was watching a TED talk from the doggist. He was just talking about kind of the relationship between people and their pets. And it was just really nice because he mentioned something like there's kind of a universal culture around how people interact with their dogs. Because he travels all over the world, like taking pictures of people with their pets. He's like, if I ask people for their pictures, then they might be a little hesitant and wonder what's going on. But if I'm like, can I get a picture of your dog? Then they're just like, oh, of course, I'd love to show you my dog. Let me get the eye boogers out and everything. And he talked about that, and also like the way like you kind of just have a direct relationship with dogs and the way they can kind of heal things because everything's very simple and straightforward. And having been to a few places, I can definitely see like the way people interact with their dogs, like regardless of culture. I could see what he's talking about. Like people love their pets, and that's one of the things that I think makes me really passionate about getting to work with a brand of like SATELLAI is people love their pets so much, and we've got the potential to help them like take care of them even better.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And then the last question is another innovator that you think we should have on our show.
Yeah, so someone I'd recommend would be Molly Van Branken with Voyager Dog Food. I think she actually also has a podcast because part of the reason I met her was at the Global Pet Expo where I was doing an interview with her. But she's also like in charge of marketing at Voyager Dog Food. And she's telling me this whole thing with like chelated copper that's actually worked its way into a lot of dog foods. And for some dogs, it's not really a big issue, but there are certain breeds that are more susceptible and they can actually get, I think she called it like some kind of copper poisoning. And so she was just telling me about how like Voyager is like finding ways to kind of like make sure that that stays out of the food supply for the dog food that they make, because you have to have like really strict management on the food production in order to keep chelated copper out, because it's really present in cat food apparently. And it seems like a lot of like the different pet foods might be made in similar factories, so there might be some like carryovers. So she was saying like you have to test it really really carefully, and not all the brands are necessarily. That's not to say like they're definitely adding chelated copper. Well, I don't know, she could tell you more. But it was just really really interesting because she's telling me like what's going on like behind the scenes and like the dog food manufacturing and this whole threat to like the big dogs and stuff that wasn't even on my radar.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of the episode, and thanks for being here. As I mentioned earlier, Talkatoo has a special offer for listeners of this podcast. If you're curious about how it works, Talkatoo is a suite of AI tools that makes note-taking faster and easier. You can record your entire appointment and get a soap note within seconds, completely automatically. Just review and approve. That's all you need to do. We also help with call summaries, discharge instructions, and many, many more. All of these things are done within seconds. Get full access to all of Talkatoo's powerful features for your first month for just $1. Sign up today at talkatoo.com/VIP. That's Talkatoo, TALKATOO.com/VIP.